Excited to welcome Japan's national men's team head coach Tom Hovasse to the Basketball Podcast. During his career as head coach of the Japanese women's basketball team, Tom did what no one thought possible, leading the team to silver at the Tokyo Olympic Games. Tom is now channeling his skills into coaching the Japanese men's team. Tom played college basketball at Penn State and played professionally from 1989 to 2001, including a brief stint with the Atlanta Hawks and 10 seasons for teams in Japan. He also served as assistant coach to the Japanese national team at the 2016 Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, where the Japan team made it as far as the quarterfinals. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate being on.
Well, it's exciting. I mean, I've wanted to talk to you for a while, and the success is tremendous. And one of the things, I mean this is a compliment. After watching your team play, the style seemed obvious. And I know, like, it's a compliment to your coaching staff, the fact that you made it look so obvious that that's the way you should be playing, and that's the way the women's team was going to have success.
Yeah, a lot went into that. The preparations for the Tokyo Olympics really began 5 years previous, when I was an assistant coach at Rio, and there were times when we played up tempo, but we always had either 4 out, 1 in, or 3 out, 2 in. And I learned from that. I really wanted to go 5 out. It was 5-6 years ago, where analytics was definitely a part of the NBA, but it really hadn't trickled down to the women's side yet. And I felt if we went all in and committed to that concept and that style, I think we could really have an impact on the women's side. So that's where it started. And when I say full commitment, it took two years for me to get like fully committed into this 5 out system, because it is a commitment, no doubt about it. If you're 50-50, it's not going to work. 70-30 is not going to. You got to be committed to this thing.
So you say that because the women's game is still very much dominated by a post potentially, right?
Yeah. So I really, I told my team, I'm like, the American women, Australia, China, they're playing 1980s basketball. It's just power inside basketball. Whereas we don't have that power, obviously, but we do have the quickness. We have shooters. We can utilize the space and create a tempo, and the players bought in, and it was a fun run up until the final game.
So you mentioned analytics, and that was an influence. Where were some of your other influences in terms of this style and learning how to adapt a 5 out system?
Well, it's kind of funny. After the Olympics, somebody forwarded me a link, and it was Jeff Van Gundy. He had said that watching the Japanese women basketball team was like a baby of the Houston Rockets and Golden State Warriors. And he was spot on, because I really love, this was obviously 3-4 years ago, where Golden State was number 1 in scoring. Golden State and Houston actually had the same efficiency. They were the leading scorers in the NBA, but they went about it completely different. Golden State had the most passes in the league. Houston had the least amount of passes. Houston had the most amount of on-ball screens. Golden State had the least amount. I loved the passing, use of space of Golden State, movement, backdoor cuts. But I also loved the spacing of the Houston Rockets and how they just planted people in the corners and dared you, if you're going to come off of them, leave a shooter open, then we're going to shoot. So it was really, those two teams influenced me quite a bit.
Well, and what I love about watching your team play in the Olympics and some of the pre-qualifications is that you did mirror a lot of what Houston did, in the sense that you got direct and right to the point, instead of a lot of masking actions, which are characteristic of a lot of European basketball, for example. Just a lot of direct action, right?
Pretty much. We do try to mask certain things. I felt what happened in the Olympics after, when you're in a tournament and you're playing that many games in front of your competition, they have a chance to scout you. Towards the end of the tournament, America, for example, they just switched everything. And they really turned us into almost a one-dimensional team. And that's something that we're still battling to this point on the men's side. teams that completely switch everything and they have the advantage on size and length, how do you attack that? So it was teams that didn't switch. We really attacked, and we got to the paint and we were able to play our game. But when teams are switching and they have the size advantage, it's finishing in the paint. It's secondary cuts. How do you utilize those types of things? So it did look a little bit more direct than what we wanted in the Olympics. But we really wanted to work the ball and get some movement and then attack is kind of our philosophy.
And we'll dive into some of that movement and some of the, I mean, just a great basketball to watch. But, you know, you talk about the USA game in particular, and that's where there were a number of boomerangs and attempts to be able to obviously attack the big matchups, create space for speed and try and drive that matchup. But, you know, talk a little bit about the advantage of that and the challenges of that as you search for this new method potentially.
Well, so to be perfectly honest with you, Rui Machida, who had an unbelievable tournament, went on to the WNBA. She wasn't, in my mind, she wasn't going to be my starting point guard. It was Motohashi, who in 2019 was the MVP of Asia. She's a scoring point guard. She can pass, she can finish, she can shoot the three. She tore her ACL 7 months before the Olympics. So she really battled hard and rehabbed, and she became my backup point guard. But for 5 out to really win you an Olympics, I think the point guard needs to score. I think you really have to put pressure on the defense from every single position. And America's, because we played them in group play, and we actually played them pretty tight in group play. And they made adjustments for the championship game, and they sagged off of Machida, and she couldn't get into the paint, and they were denying our shooters. So what I did was when I stuck Motohashi in, she just lit it up. So she went, I think she was 4 for 5 from 3. She had 16 points. She was our leading scorer because she's a point guard that can score. And I think if she was healthy, I don't think America could have played that defense that they played, because they would have had a hard time containing her.
Well, that's interesting, because the blueprint to stop a 5 out like yours is obviously to not help and to switch everything. And, you know, America was one of the few teams that did it or could do it.
Yeah. You've got Asia Wilson, who can move her feet. She's long. Brianna Stewart was playing the 3 spot, super long, can move her feet. And Brittany Griner. So one of the big plays that stuck out in my mind was Motohashi, when in the first quarter she drove and she did a reverse over Brittany Griner, and Motohashi's 5'2". Mm-hmm. But that's the type of scoring that she can do in the paint. So I think it's really important to attack from that point guard spot to really try to get them out of that defense.
Well, I love talking 5 out, and obviously so many coaches are fascinated by it. And, we see in the NBA, the spacing is just different, right? So it doesn't necessarily always apply to other levels. So one of the challenges at the FIBA and below levels are creating gaps to be able to attack. So can you talk about different ways that you try to create gaps?
Yeah, well, we always try to create double gap drives, and one of the best way to do that, we call it slot cuts, where it's from the 45, from the free throw line extend. Everybody's running it, and when you mentioned masking earlier, that cut is kind of a masking element where you cut, you get the defense moving, and then if you can bring it to the other side and do something, create more cutting and more movement, and then create your double gap drive. Your double gap scenario, I think it's a lot more effective. So initial movements to try to create a double gap, defenses are pretty hip to that, and they can figure that out pretty quickly. I think it's getting teams a little bit deeper into the shot clock, maybe left to right on the court, possibly doing some, we call it Euro or grenade action out of the low post, trying to create different angles and variations on how to attack that.
So when you do have cutters, was it a question of after the cut, are they getting into space, then getting out to space as fast as possible?
Oh, yeah, we're clear. We want that paint clear. So a lot of our stuff, and I practice this every day, is driving, kicking, shooter relocations, getting if there's an empty spot, sprinting to that empty spot. So we have to be just a little bit more on point because of our deficiencies in size, and we have to be more on point. We have to be more movement as just a team in general, and things have to be quicker. We really have to speed stuff up, and that's kind of where we practice fast and try to play fast.
Yeah, and you did, and it was so fun to watch. So thank you. And just with that, when they did sprint out to space, I'm curious because I've seen it with some other Asian teams that they try and bring the ball back to the player sprinting out, because a help side defender's tendency is that to relax a second, right? Because the ball's
Right.
away from them. Now they're cutting out with such speed that you bring the ball back to them. Was that a point of emphasis?
Well, are you talking attacking closeouts and trying to get?
Well, just after someone penetrates and kicks, when they get out to space, then are you trying to bring it back to them, or was that?
So again, I bring it back to Golden State. Their shooter relocation. How if Stephen Curry drives, kicks it out, he'll lull his man to sleep and then bust out to try to get a shot. That's something we work on, not with all of our players. So
that's what I meant. Yes, that.
Yeah, no, that's definitely part of our system is trying to get. We try to put pressure on a team every second we can, every chance we can, and some of that is change of pace, busting out, trying to get an open shot. Yeah, so that definitely is part of our thought process.
Well, that Golden State example is a perfect one with Steph Curry, that they bring it back to him with action. And another thing that I saw, and I don't know if it was like intentional all the time, but really out of transition, I thought you did a great job creating a lot of gaps in transition where you would 45 cut from transition. Was that a deliberate action, or was that a play call, or was that just a read decision?
So with the women's team, we had so much prep time. I had 5 different transition sets, and we would change it during a game. We would change it depending on what the other team is running. So we had several different options out of that. With the men's, I really simplified it. We don't have the practice time that we had with the women. So I've simplified it, and we are doing some of that slot cut action in transition. I think, before the defense gets set, keeping them on their heels and trying to apply pressure that way. Yeah. So some of that definitely is.
Yeah, it was really good to watch. I'm glad you're doing it with the men's team. I haven't had a chance to watch your men's team yet, but the other part that goes with that is just play calling in general. And I think you referenced this in a few articles that you did have a lot of little set quick actions after you modeled after the NBA, right? So I'm curious, what type of play calling system did you devise to be able to call those plays as quickly?
So I'm terrible at calling plays. I've had I didn't want to be like the NBA where I try to disguise it as much as possible. We used a lot of Japanese terms. I would create a Japanese name and the girls would laugh at me and we'd change it and do whatever. But for the women's, we had so much time to prepare, and I really probably went a little bit overboard on some of we had over 100 sets and different things, and all the players knew it front and back. But it's not realistic to do that on the men's side. Typically for these FIBA windows, we only have 10 days of practice or not even 10 days, about a week of practice, and then we play in the game. So I've really just simplified it on the men's side to entry actions, and then it's read and react, and you guys have to, they have to figure it out. But we do have certain team rules, which are vital to what we do. One of the biggest things that I learned going through that Olympic experience was giving roles to players, clear cut roles. I'm to the point where, I don't know if you remember Hayashi, she was one of our shooters. Basically, I said, your role is to 3-point shoot. So if you shoot 10 times, I want 9 of those to be threes. So in her mind, she's like, man, I just have to pop and get open and shoot threes. And she doesn't have to drive. If she gets it, the shot's not there, she might be able to drive, but more than often, she would just pass it. So I create these, try to create a clear, simple role for every player. and they have to know their teammates' roles. So once you know your role and your teammates' roles, then it starts to become this fluid, connected team where if there's a big 5-man in the corner and let's say our point guard drives, kicks it out, well, that big is looking to pin the three, and he's in or pin the point guard, and the point guard's looking to pop to get a shot or get the ball in space. So that's kind of something that I really started focusing in on, especially after the Olympics and on this men's team as well.
It strikes me about one of the values of that is that you're giving them freedom from choice. So it actually gives them more permission and freedom to do what they're good at, right?
Yes, and there's no confusion. There's no second guessing. Should I shoot this? I get mad if they don't shoot, and that's 1 through 5. So if we're not putting pressure on the defense at every single position, guess what? If we're playing Australia, Thonmaker can just sit in the paint, and that's a killer for a 5-out system to have a 7-footer standing in the paint where we can't finish in the paint. So everybody's got to be option 1. And that's another thing that I make sure that these players know. All my players are from the B League now on the men's side. And to be honest with you, most of them are option 3 or option 4 because they have foreign players in their spots. And when they get that mindset where I've got to pass it to the low post or I've got to get it to this foreign player, they become a non-aggressive. And when they come to the national team, that's one of the first things that I preach. Forget what you do on your B League team. On this team, everybody is option 1. And you have to attack when you're open. You have to shoot when you're open, depending on your role, if you're a shooter or a penetrator. And that's one of the things that we really work hard on to change. And we have changed that in this past year.
Well, I do want to get into mindset quite a bit with you because I know that's been part of your success in building the relationships. And just before we do, maybe let's stick with the 5-out if you don't mind. Sure. The one thing, the 3-side kind of overload spacing when you're driving middle seems to be another common discussion point for 5-out and what the reaction is. And it seemed like you cut the corner on middle drives when there's a 3-side, or was that, again, a read?
What do you mean I cut the corner?
So the low corner.
Oh, the low corner cuts?
Yeah, to make it, to balance the spacing, so to speak, because there's 3 on a side.
No, again, that depends on what player's in the corner and the role of that player. If it's a knock dead shooter, they're just gonna stick to that shooter, and the defender's not gonna sag in.
Cutters cut and shooters hold.
But we do have a role, and it's our secondary cutting. So if we're always watching our defender's head, if they looked at the ball, you always have a green light to cut. But per role, and our point guards know this, if our knock dead shooter's in the corner, she's probably not going to cut. But if it's our 2-man who's a little bit lengthy and long, she has the right to cut. So, but that's something we practice all the time, and it's a feel. Guarding that is really difficult to guard if it's done properly and it's timed right.
Well, I love it because again, it creates there's a spacing template, but within that template, there's a whole bunch of decisions that make it not predictable in any way, right? So
that was something I was very pleased with at the Olympics. So Diana Taurasi, I coached her back in 2012. I was a volunteer assistant coach with Phoenix Mercury for a season and a half, and I got to know her a little bit. But after the Olympics, right after our championship game, she came up to me and she said, "Man, you guys are so hard to guard. We don't know what you're going to do." And I told her, I was like, "That's because we don't know what we're going to do. We're reading and reacting to what you guys are doing." And she said it was one of the most difficult things for them in scouting because there was no template, there was no sets, and there was no set plays. And for a national team coach or national teams in general, you have these tournaments where, like I said earlier, you're playing 5 to 7 games in front of your who you could possibly be playing against next. And it can't be sets. You just can't you can't run sets because they'll defend it, they'll scout it, and they'll stop it. So for me, it's all about putting the right players in the right position and having those players make the right decisions.
Well, and more often than not, they did. And the part that made you guys less predictable was the go screens, the slips, the rolls, and then the follow screens or the rescreens. That's what I loved seeing. Is like sometimes it was a rescreen, sometimes it was someone else following with a screen, and it was just made it really hard to guard, I imagine.
Yeah, and the defender doesn't know where it's coming, what's coming next, and we had. So on that team, the women's team, and I don't think she gets enough publicity, but my captain of the team was Takata. She was my 5-man, and she's an undersized 5-man, 6'1", but she's very strong. She can defend. To me, she was very much like Draymond Green. So her role was pretty much Draymond Green's, but she could shoot the three. So she was a great decision maker. She knew what her role was. She knew when to screen, where to screen, angles, and she could pick and pop. So she shot 53% from three in the Olympics, and she was putting up, I think, four shots a game. And that was a killer when you have a 5-man who knows the game, high IQ, can pass, but she can also shoot and stretch the defense. That was complete key for us.
And how did you get her or some of the other players that set the on the ball screens or on the ball actions to balance between, again, ghosting it versus setting it and rolling it? Because again, it seemed to be very difficult to decide what they were going to do.
Some of that was scouting. So America liked to switch a lot. So when teams switch, we tried to do a lot of ghost actions. And if teams started going under our point, going under Rui Machida, then it would be a rescreen scenario, trying to get her going downhill a little bit. So some of that was scouting. A lot of it was, again, just the player decision making. And that was based off of months of prep.
It was great. And I think everyone can picture, if they haven't watched your team, when they go watch it, they'll see kind of the blend of the Houston Rockets and a little bit of Golden State. And it's awesome. It's really obvious when you said both those. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, Jeff Van Gundy, when he said that, he blew my mind, because I spent 2 years preaching that to my players. And when he said that, I was like, man, there's a reason that guy's where he's at right now. So he's a pretty smart guy.
I think recently you spent some time with Golden State as well. So did that add some extra little tricks to your bag?
So Golden State came to Tokyo for the NBA games last month. And they didn't really have long practices. It was more of kind of shoot around, getting their feet on the ground after a long flight. But I had a good chance to talk with Steve Kerr. We talked for about 15 minutes after his practice, and he was very complimentary as well. He said, "I love what you guys did in Tokyo," and I said, "Well, you should, because it was mostly your stuff." And he said, I thought I saw some similar stuff there. So it was a fun conversation.
It's a heck of a compliment for sure. And it's been fun to watch you do some of the similar stuff with the men's team. And before we shift a little bit, I may be wrong. It seemed like at times some players were using the tagging up concept of getting on the high side on offensive rebounding. Was that deliberate?
It is. Yeah.
But not all players did it all the time, right? It wasn't a complete 5 players.
Well, you're talking women's team, huh?
The women's team, yeah.
Okay, women's team, I wasn't implementing tagging up at that time. And I learned from the Olympics. So part of the image and aura that we created on the women's side was transition. We'll kill you in transition. We want to go fast. We want to go hard. So a lot of teams stopped crashing the boards. They stopped crashing boards so they get back on defense. So, but for us on the offensive, we knew we had to increase our possessions. I'm always about increasing possessions, whether that be through steals, offensive rebounds, or 2-for-1 opportunities. I'm very aggressive in that. Again, full commitment, right? Points per possession, analytic basketball. You want to raise as much as you can. On the women's side, we were very aggressive on getting offensive rebounds. And I left that, even as a player, I didn't like a coach saying, if you're below the free throw line on the weak side, you have to go. I hated that.
Right.
You
wanted clarity and you wanted freedom to be able to go do it.
I wanted freedom. If I felt like I had a chance to get that rebound, I'm going to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to give that to the players. And I didn't say only 3 can go to the offensive rebound, only 2. I don't like that either, because now people are trying to think, should I go or not? So I was very aggressive and open and free with our offensive rebounding. That was one of the points where we had to beat bigger teams. We have to do certain things like that.
I was just going to say, with it seemed to play into you being able to put pressure on the ball full court too, right?
Correct. What hurt, and I learned this at the Olympics, was our transition defense. We were getting beat. We gave up a lot of points in transition, which, again, that's a double-edged sword as well. We could not be aggressive on the offensive rebounds, come back and slow the game down, or be aggressive on the rebounds. Okay, they come in and they get 2. We're getting the ball right back in and we're going at them again. So the pace is picking up, and that's something that we wanted to do.
David Arsenault and Grinnell somewhere are kind of nodding their head.
Yeah, right. And so that's, as a team that's small, you have to do that. You're going to give up buckets under the rim, but they have to get back 94 feet to pick you up and stop you. So there's give and take with that. But on the men's side, I felt like we had to shore up our transition defense and try this offensive rebounding system. So I started implementing the tagging up on the men's team, and it hasn't increased our offensive rebounds. It hasn't. It hasn't hurt it. It just hasn't increased it. It has completely changed our transition defense. Our transition, we were giving up, I want to say, in the Olympics, 16 to on the men's team, they were giving up 16, 18, 20 points in transition. And when I started on the men's side, we were giving up 16, 18 points in transition. And now it's the Asia Cup, I think it was down to 4. Tagged up, stopped. We were matched up properly. So there's definitely some good things from that.
Yeah, and I think if you talk to Aaron Fern, I mean, obviously it's called an offensive rebounding system, but really he makes sure you understand it's a defensive transition system. And I think most coaches that have used it now do see that value of that more than anything. Yeah,
without a doubt. I've done it for the last 4 windows. So we've done it. We've got some data now to back things up, because it was new to me when I started on the men's side, and I wasn't sure about it, but I'm definitely going to continue using it.
It's great. I mean, fun to watch. And, you referenced mindset a few times here, and maybe start with the mindset for the women's team first and becoming a fearless team that puts up a lot of 3-point shots. Is that a hard sell?
No. So when I mentioned I was the assistant coach at Rio, and when they asked me to be the head coach in 2017, that was the thing I wanted to change the most. So changing their mindset. I felt like we were a top 4 team in Rio, but the team was happy to be in 8th place. I couldn't understand that. And I felt like we were good enough to be there, but mentally we weren't. And I felt like we needed a solid goal and we needed to change our mindset. So at my press conference, when I became head coach of the women's team, I said, we're going to play America in the championship game in the Tokyo Olympics, and we're going to win gold medal. That was my goal. Very clear, very specific, very high goal. And nobody really believed me. They were laughing, but I believed, and the players believed. So I went I asked every player, do you believe in this goal? Yes. Okay, so everybody's committed. Now we have the goal set. So how do you change their mindset? How do you go from being a little wishy-washy on what we're going to do to being rock solid on focused on that goal and how do we attain that goal. And for me, it was always challenging the players, practicing harder than any other country in the world. And that became our bedrock. It was even before the championship game or the semifinals against France. Have they practiced harder than us? No. Okay. Are they a better team than us? No. So we believed 100% in what we were doing. And it was clear once the players bought in. I mean, they bought in right from the beginning, but it works on so many different levels. So if you have a bad practice, I would ask the captain in front of everybody, Captain, is this practice going to get us to the gold medal in the Olympics? And she's like, no. I'm like, okay. So we have to change and we have to bring it. We have to raise this standard. This is not enough. And the players realized it, and it wasn't just me barking orders. It was the players 100% bought in, to the point where after the championship game, when we lost against Team USA, who had won 55 games in a row in the Olympics, we were shocked. That's how confident we were that we were gonna win. We were shocked. Tears. It wasn't supposed to end that way for us. That's how bought in everybody was.
That's great. I mean, you either win or you cry afterwards. That's the epitome of that, isn't it?
Yeah, it really was. It was an amazing ride.
No, it was incredible. It was so much fun to watch. And you referenced a few things there, and you mentioned, I read some of the articles you talked about that, like the Japanese women's players, for example, putting in long hours was not a foreign thing, right? It was kind of part of the culture of the game. But what you were trying to do is to get them to see beyond just putting in long hours and making it more beneficial. Yeah.
So the women here and this isn't just the national team. I'll give you, it's every single team in the league. I'll just give you a daily breakdown of what they do. 6:30 shooting in the morning. It's voluntary shooting, but everybody does it. 8 o'clock breakfast, 10 to 11:30 or 12 practice in the morning. I don't use contact. It's more 5-on-0, getting our spacing done, getting up and down a little bit. Working on new plays, and then they'll lift weights. Lunch from 12:30 or 1. We'll start practice at 3:30 in the afternoon, and that'll be 2 hours. That's full contact, full practice. So 3:30 to 5:30. After practice, the girls will typically shoot for about an hour. So from 5:30, and they'll shoot until 6:37, eat dinner, and then go to bed and start the day again. That's every day. And that's what we do. Yeah. And it's the culture. It's the basketball culture, which it has its positives and minuses. I think injuries are something, a little burnout at times, but it really creates a team of gym rats. It's crazy. I try to get them out of the gym.
I was going to ask you about that, because sometimes there's that point of diminishing returns, and especially in the you talked about analytics, and we talked about workload management being part of modern basketball as well. So I'm imagining you were monitoring workloads a little bit too.
No, so what I was, again, this is I want to try to answer your question previous, which was,
well, it's just talking about the difference between long hours and being productive.
Okay, so yeah, exactly. So what I tried to do was I actually cut down the hours a little bit, but it was much more focused, much more attentive to details, and it was more efficient, I thought, and it was focused on getting to our goal. In terms of workload management, this is, again, you're riding on the edge. It's the razor's edge. So before the 2018 World Cup, I had the opportunity to speak with Canada, Australia, USA's director of development and different people within their countries. And I was shocked. They have doctors involved, psychologists, to create the perfect amount of practice time, hour and a half, and they don't typically go over an hour and a half, and everything's that way. And to be honest with you, I'm listening to this and I'm just like, well, this is our opportunity, because we're going to go harder than that. We're going to go further than that. And that's our advantage, without a doubt. And that's the advantage of a lot of Asian countries. China, for example, I guarantee you that they don't practice an hour and a half.
And they don't practice once a day.
No, they're practicing twice a day. Again, it's. I think America can get away with it because of their talent level and talent pool. I thought Australia couldn't get away with it. I don't think, and that was proven correct because they went down a little bit once they started doing that. I think. I don't think they're as deep as America. Canada, I think, had the same thing. So, just because America does it doesn't mean it's right.
No, and generally it's not if you're trying to compete against America, is it?
Exactly. So that was that was another mindset. If we want to beat America and we practice like America, we're going to lose 100 times out of 100 times.
Well, and play their style and do all these other things, right?
Yeah. So we had to do everything opposite. And that was what we do and how we did it.
So my experience with Asian countries, I've had a few, and you said this in an article, so it leads into this part of the conversation, which is that one of the strengths and one of the weaknesses is that there's this adherence to the rules, that they do like structure and they follow structure, but your goal almost is to make them less structured after they get structured. And it's this kind of dichotomy that goes back and forth, isn't it, a little bit? And that's really the beauty of what you did, I feel, is you got them to play free.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it as well. The players were amazing. It'd be hard pressed for me to find a coach who had a better group of players in terms of do this and they'll do it. Do this and they'll do it. And then a year and a half before the Olympics, I started getting, it was more, I need your decision. Your decision-making is key to this. And I think the players just really loved that and they really blossomed, I felt. But you have to have that foundation of fundamentals. You have to have that foundation of what the team rules and the team concepts, and knowing your roles, knowing your role, the team's roles, believing in it. And belief is not just it's not a shallow thing. Belief is a deep concept, and you can tell when people believe in something with their heart, and you can tell people who don't believe with their heart.
A lot of unseen hours to get to that point, I know. And again, tremendous to watch. And you referenced the men's team, and now focus on that a little bit. I mean, you don't have the same opportunity in terms of having them together as long and some of the different things. Can you reference some of the other challenges on the men's side that maybe didn't exist for the women's side? Yeah,
a lot of it's off the court in terms of the B League. The B League here has 60 regular season games. The champions of the B League typically play with playoffs and everything, close to 90 games. So Japan plays the second amount of games, second only to the NBA. And again, the talent level's not there. So I'm getting these players for my window, and they're right in the middle of their season. They're tired. It's just a different mindset. So a lot of that stuff, a lot of the differences are off court. I was happy to find that the men are just as focused once we get on the court and just as committed to what we're doing. So that was phenomenal to me. I cut down a little bit some of the practice times just because of their schedules and things like that. But basketball is basketball. I did some of the major changes I made were more getting away from the sets, getting into a set amount of entries, and then 5-out basketball, and getting our team rules in there and making sure they know their roles. And once they got that, man, we started rolling a little bit. In the Asia Cup, we lost to Iran and we lost to Australia, two very good teams, and they had two centers, 7-foot centers that clogged up the paint. That gave us some problems. Okay. But we played 5 games and we averaged 96 points a game. We led the tournament, the Asia Cup, in scoring. We shot 41 threes a game and we made 41% of the threes. We shot 52% from 2. We shot 81% from the free throw line, and everything that we were working on improved. And the players got it. And during the summer, we had window 3. A week and a half later, we had Asia Cup. And then 2 weeks later, we had window 4. And I had 4 completely different teams.
I was going to ask you about that because roster fluctuates so much with these FIBA windows.
Yeah, I had 42 players.
Wow.
in those windows. So that was one of the things I was most happy about was we didn't have to start from scratch. I would have a couple players retained from, let's say, window 3 to the Asia Cup, and they were the drivers, and we just kept getting better and better. So simplified concepts, so there's no confusion. There's not a whole lot of learning plays, putting people in the right spot to utilize their talents, and it worked pretty well.
And I'm curious, have you had your best roster ever together in one of these windows?
No. For the Asia Cup, we had Yuta Watanabe, which was great. He sprained his ankle, so he only played in 3.5 games. And then in window 4, we had Udai Baba, who's with the Texas G League team now. And Udai was great. So we had him in window 4. Rui Hachimoto hasn't come in yet. So we'll get all 3 of those guys 28 days before the World Cup next year.
How fun is that going to be?
Yeah, I'm excited. I really am. Because all three of those players fit into this system very well.
I was going to say that all of them will not have a hard time adjusting to what you're doing because they're to a certain extent already playing that way.
Yeah, exactly. And luckily, I've got some friends on the staff at Washington. So, like Dean Oliver, the king of analytics, he and I are talking and I'm trying to make sure that when Rui does get to my team, the transition is as smooth as possible. So whether that's putting in concepts that Washington runs that he likes, or putting him in spots that I know he can excel in.
Well, and it's what an opportunity for him, because in a way too, he gets to up-level his role from what he did at Washington, right? And you talked about that with some of the players in the B League changing their role, and now he gets to change his role.
Yeah, no, exactly. And not just with Rui, Yuta Watanabe is going to become a main focus. Baba, Udai, he really wants to make the NBA, but he has to improve his three-point shooting. And we've been working on that really, really hard over the last couple months. And I'm really excited to see what happens with him. So I'm using the national team to help develop these guys to hopefully, extend their careers or make their careers even better. So it's been great. And I actually have 2 players on my national team now who could play major roles. One plays 2 minutes a game and the other one plays 3 minutes a game on his B League team. That's it. Because they have foreigners in front of them.
I was going to say, and just reference that for everyone, that the women's league has no foreigners, right?
Yeah, the women's league has no foreigners. Yeah,
and the men's league has unlimited, 7. Or what's the rule?
No, there's 2, and then you have players that are nationalized.
Right. There definitely looks like more than 2 when I watch games.
Yes, there definitely is, and it's very focused on those individuals.
Well, it's just, again, Tom, what a journey for you in basketball in general. And I'm sure, again, you never thought that you'd be the national team head coach, and how rare that is to be of both teams.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. I played here for 10 years, and I thought that was going to be it. I did marry a Japanese woman. My kids were born here. So I do have ties in Japan. And I was actually an assistant coach for a women's team for 7 years. And then I became head coach. So I put my time in on the women's side for sure. And I didn't even think about coaching the men's team. After the Olympics, they asked me to coach the men's team, and thought long and hard about it. It was tough. It was a difficult decision because of the ties that we had. It was an emotional time after the Olympics, but I committed to it, and it's been a huge challenge. But man, it's not a lot of people have had this opportunity, and I'm grateful and thankful, and I'm excited about what we can do. I think we have pieces to this puzzle that can make us a tough out.
Absolutely. And, we're all witnessing kind of the top end product of Japanese basketball. Can you give us a little bit of impression of what's happening more at the grassroots in terms of development with Japanese basketball? Because I know there's lots of exciting things going on there too.
Yeah. So basketball's ramping up and starting to become a major sport. The B League began 5 years ago. So they fused two leagues together and it became the B League. And it's been a huge success. There's 5 or 6 Japanese players making over $1 million a year. The foreigners are making great money. The coaches are making great money. Again, I said in the league, they have
not to stop you, but coaches are jumping intentionally to the Japanese league.
Yeah, it's been crazy. Because there's good money. To live in Japan is fantastic. It's safe, clean. It's just a fantastic place to live. So the top league has really been taking off, and some of the issues that I talked about earlier is the national team has to be part of that growth, and we need better communication between the league and the national team, and we've been working on that, and I think we're getting that dialed in. So the grassroots have now, the B leagues have under category teams, so they're really trying to do it right, and they're getting the younger guys, the younger kids involved. Basketball is slowly becoming, and 3-on-3 is very popular here. I think the Olympics really shed the light on a lot of different aspects of basketball. And with the success of the women's team in the Olympics, the players have been on TV quite a bit. There's been a spotlight on women's basketball, and they're sold out all the time. Everything, their games are all sold out. The men's team, we have a huge following. We just need to break through and start winning some of these games.
Tom, it's been a long time coming for me. I've worked very hard behind the scenes to get you on, and I appreciate all the communication from you and the Federation, and it has been worth it. Thank you so much for sharing the game with us.
Thank you, Chris. I'm sorry it took this long.
You jumped teams. That kind of was a good thing, and we can't say
it created a like 6 months of just where am I at, what am I doing, and getting pulled from different directions. But thankful that you had me on. I appreciate your patience, and I hope this was a fun talk. It was fun for me.
Great. It was tremendous, and it was fun. And thank you. And a lot of people will be following Japanese basketball now from afar. So best of luck.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.